My name is Evelyn Rhodes. I'm 70 years old, and I used to believe that love, real love, was enough. That if you gave your heart, your home, and your hands to raise someone, they'd never forget it. I don't have children of my own, but you couldn't have convinced me of that when I looked at Daniel and Ben. They were just boys when they came into my life. My brother, Mark, had passed unexpectedly in a car accident, left them behind at ages 6 and 9. Their mother? She left the state 2 weeks later with a new boyfriend. I still remember standing on the courthouse steps with both of them holding onto my coat sleeves, asking if I was their new mum now. I wasn't. But in every way that mattered, I was. I raised them in the same old farmhouse I grew up in, a long stretch of land passed down from my father, with a white picket fence that needed repainting every few years, and oak trees that rained acorns every fall. It wasn't glamorous, but it was home. I taught them how to ride bikes down our gravel drive. I sat through every school meeting, nursed them through chickenpox, heartbreaks, scraped knees, and broken noses. I gave them everything I had, and then some. I never remarried, never travelled much. All I wanted was to see them grow into good men. They did grow up, in ways at least. Daniel got into construction. Ben bounced between jobs, nothing stable. But they always came back. Birthdays, Thanksgiving, mowing the lawn when I started complaining about my back. I took those gestures as love, loyalty, family. Then about a year ago, they started coming around more often. Daniel would bring lunch. Ben helped me fix the roof shingles. It felt good, like all that I'd given was circling back. They'd talk about how hard things are out there, and how lucky I was to still have this place. I'd laugh it off, tell them I wasn't lucky, just stubborn. The land had been in our family for nearly a century. My daddy built the barn with his own hands. He told me once, "Never let anyone make you feel like what you earned is negotiable." I thought I was safe. These were my boys. Then came the afternoon that changed everything. They walked in with manila folders, smiles too wide, and Daniel said, "Aunt Evie, we've been helping you out around here, and we thought we could take some of the pressure off your shoulders." Ben chimed in. "Just some quick paperwork, taxes and deed adjustments. Nothing serious. We'll explain it later." I remember pausing, holding that pen over the line. I even laughed nervously and said, "You boys better not be selling me off to the circus." Daniel squeezed my shoulder and said, "We'd never do that." So I signed. I signed away the very land my father built, my mother gardened, and I raised 2 lost boys on. And in doing so, I handed them the key to their own betrayal. But the worst part wasn't losing the land. It was realizing I never really knew the people I thought I'd raised, and that, I would soon learn, would be their biggest mistake. It started with a phone call, a strange number. I almost didn't answer. Figured it was another scammer trying to get me to renew a warranty on a car I hadn't owned since the 90s. But something told me to pick up. "Hello, is this Mrs. Evelyn Rhodes?" "Yes." "This is Wendy from Cascadia Credit Union. I'm just confirming that you're still interested in the home equity line of credit tied to 117 Fieldstone Road." My heart didn't drop. It stopped. "I'm sorry. The what?" "The HELOC. Your nephews, Daniel and Benjamin Rhodes, submitted the documents 2 days ago, including the recent title transfer paperwork signed by you. You're listed as the previous owner." I couldn't breathe. I had to sit down on the edge of the old armchair I'd patched 3 times. The fabric felt foreign. Everything suddenly did. "They're applying for a loan against my home?" I asked, my voice trembling. There was a pause on the line. "Technically, ma'am. It's no longer your home. I hung up, not angrily, just stunned. I stared at the picture on the wall, me holding Daniel on his first day of school, tooth missing, smiling like the world belonged to him. In a way, I guess he always thought it did. I shuffled over to the kitchen drawer where I kept all my important papers. Wills, insurance, receipts dating back to when bread cost 75 cents. I found the folder they gave me, pulled it open and laid the papers out like a crime scene. And there it was. I had signed over the property. Not partially, not with caveats, fully. Daniel and Ben were now listed as owners. I, Evelyn Rhodes, had no more legal claim to the land I was born on. For the first time in my life, I felt like a guest in my own home. Every cabinet I opened felt unfamiliar. Every floorboard creak sounded like a warning. But I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't call them. Instead, I got quiet. Still. Like the air right before a thunderstorm rolls through and tears the sky open. I poured myself a cup of tea, let it sit untouched. And I remembered something. Years ago, during a summer storm, my daddy told me, "When a storm's coming, you don't run around screaming. You board up the windows and wait for the wind to show its face." That night, I didn't sleep. I paced. I dug through old paperwork. I reviewed everything they'd said the past few weeks. The odd comments, the jokes about cashing in on family land. Ben's little remark, "Don't worry, Aunt Evie, you won't even notice the difference." They had planned this. They had preyed on my trust. I wasn't stupid. I was just kind, and they'd mistaken that for weakness. But kindness and weakness are not the same thing. So, I made one phone call. To someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Her name was Claire. She used to sit in the front row of my American history class, back when I was still teaching. She'd gone on to become a property attorney, a sharp one, according to the Christmas letters I still received from her mother. I left a message. "Claire, this is Evelyn Rhodes. I think I need your help." She called back in 10 minutes flat. The next morning, we had tea on my porch. I handed her the documents. She didn't speak for a full minute. Then she looked up at me with narrowed eyes and said, "Aunt Evelyn, we're going to burn them for this. Legally." And in that moment, something shifted, not just in my heart, but in the air itself. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was the storm. The irony wasn't lost on me, that I was planting tomatoes while plotting a legal ambush. But that's exactly what I did. I spent the next 2 weeks weeding the front garden with dirt under my nails and fire in my chest. To anyone passing by, I was the same Evelyn, gracious, retired, a little too attached to her heirloom roses. But behind every polite smile was a woman archiving betrayal, one memory at a time. Claire had been crystal clear. "Don't let them suspect anything. We need documentation, dates, statements, behavior, anything you can remember." So, I became an observer in my own life, watching them. Daniel came by most afternoons, often smelling like sawdust and cheap beer. He'd kiss my cheek and say, "How's my favourite lady?" He started mentioning renovation plans. "We could tear down that old shed, maybe turn this place into something marketable." I smiled and nodded and offered him sweet tea. Ben was worse. He'd started showing up in dress shirts, claiming he was networking with investors. One afternoon, I overheard him on the phone in the driveway saying, "It's ours, man." All of it. "We'll sell before she even realizes the paperwork went through." I stood just inside the window, holding a plate of cookies I suddenly had no appetite for. They thought they had time. They thought their little charade had worked. But I was cataloguing everything. Claire helped me get the original deed certified, notarized. She pulled county records, found the date the title had been altered, found out the notary they used had never even seen me in person, just approved a digital signature with a forged photo. That was their first mistake. The second, they underestimated how fast a retired schoolteacher with a sharp lawyer and nothing left to lose could move. Claire filed a preliminary complaint with the county. She contacted a private investigator, another one of her law school friends. He traced the equity line Ben was trying to open, found the application, pulled the footage from the credit union's security cameras. It showed Ben and Daniel laughing in the lobby. Laughing. I watched that clip on Claire's laptop and felt something inside me harden like clay left out in the sun. "They're gonna lose everything," Claire said. I looked her dead in the eye and replied, "No, Claire. They already did, but I wasn't finished." One morning, while walking Jasper, my neighbour's mutt, who'd taken a shine to me, I passed the barn and heard Daniel inside on speakerphone. He was talking to a buyer. "Yeah, it's in a prime spot. Big plot. Old lady's on her last leg. It'll be cleared out by fall." He laughed. My hands gripped the leash tighter. That evening, I sat down with a pen and a spiral-bound notebook. I wrote everything I could remember. Dates, statements, times, their casual cruelty, their calculated betrayal, all of it. The notebook filled page after page. I wasn't angry in the way most people imagine it. I wasn't throwing things or shouting at the sky. My rage came like frost, quiet, creeping, devastating. You don't see it until your garden's gone. But this time, I wasn't losing anything. They were. And the next move wasn't mine to make. It was the county's. It was the law's. It was justice. And it was coming. It happened on a Thursday morning, just after I'd finished steeping my tea. I was standing by the kitchen window, watching the first real light of day stretch across the garden, when I heard it. A firm knock, 3 short raps, evenly spaced. Not the kind of knock a neighbour makes, the kind that carries authority, intent. I opened the door, and there they were. 2 deputies, one younger, barely out of training by the look of him. The other, older, with a weathered face that had seen more than he probably cared to. They both wore dark sunglasses and straight faces. Behind them, a plain white sedan idled quietly at the curb. "Mrs. Evelyn Rhodes?" "Yes." "Ma'am, we have a warrant related to a real estate fraud complaint filed with the county clerk and supported by your attorney, Claire Benton." I didn't flinch. "I know." The younger deputy looked surprised. "You do?" I nodded once and stepped aside. "They're not here, but they'll be back soon. Would you like some tea while you wait?" The older deputy chuckled under his breath. "No, thank you, ma'am, but that's mighty kind." I sat in the living room, hands folded in my lap, while the officers waited just outside. I could hear their radios crackling softly. Birds chirped. The wind carried the scent of soil and peony. It was a perfectly normal morning. Except it wasn't. At exactly 9:14 a.m., Daniel's truck pulled into the gravel drive. Ben followed a minute later in his used Honda, music blaring through an open window. They didn't even see the deputies at first. "Morning, Aunt Evie," Daniel called as he hopped out, slamming the truck door. Ben whistled as he walked toward the porch, fiddling with his phone. "Did you get those forms I emailed last night? The ones about refinancing?" I stood in the doorway. "You might want to speak to the gentleman waiting for you." They turned. 2 badges. 4 hands on holsters. Daniel blinked first. "What the hell is this?" "Daniel Rhodes, Benjamin Rhodes," the older deputy said, pulling papers from his vest pocket. "You're under arrest for filing fraudulent property transfers, financial elder abuse, and attempted wire fraud." Ben's face turned ghostly pale. "Wait, what? This is some kind of mistake. You have the right to remain silent." "No, no, no." Daniel backed up toward the truck. "Aunt Evie, what are you doing? What did you tell them?" I didn't answer, because nothing I could say would be louder than the sound of their handcuffs clicking shut. Ben's voice cracked. "Please. You don't understand. This was all supposed to help you. We were just trying to manage things for you." "Funny," I said quietly. "That's not what you told the man at the bank, or the buyer, or your friends on the phone." Daniel turned red, veins bulging in his neck. "You were going to die in this place anyway. We were just—" He stopped himself, but it was too late. The younger deputy led him toward the cruiser, ducking his head under the doorframe. Ben followed, crying now. "I loved you," he said, voice shaking as they guided him away. "We just needed help, Aunt Evie. That's all." "You don't use people you love," I said, still standing in the doorway. "You protect them, even when they're tired. Especially then." They drove away in silence. No sirens, just the soft sound of gravel crunching beneath wheels. And for the first time in weeks, I sat down and drank my tea. Still warm, still sweet. Just like I like it. But this time, it tasted like peace. It didn't take long for the town to start talking. By sundown, the arrest was already circulating through every group text, hair salon, and grocery store line from Main Street to Maple Hollow. Small towns are like that. Secrets don't stay buried long. And when the news involves two hometown boys in handcuffs and the woman who raised them pressing charges, well, that's all anyone needs to clear their schedules. I didn't go outside that day, not out of shame, but because I didn't owe anyone a statement. I stayed on my back porch, sipping lemon water and pruning dead leaves from my window boxes, while the world spun its own version of events. Claire had warned me this would happen. "Some people will call you brave," she said. "Others will call you cruel. Let them." Still, I braced myself when my landline rang. Caller ID, Sharon Riggs. Sharon had lived 3 streets over for 20 years. She ran the women's circle at church and managed the annual bake sale like it was a military operation. She also knew every whisper in town before it became public. I picked up. "Sharon? Honey?" She exhaled, not with judgment, but with stunned awe. "Is it true?" "I suppose that depends on what version you heard." "That Daniel and Ben tried to steal your house, that you pressed charges, that the sheriff came to your front porch and carted them off like raccoons in a trash bin." I smiled faintly. "Something like that." She didn't speak for a moment. Then she said something I wasn't expecting. "Good. I hope they rot." That hit harder than I thought it would. Sharon had known them since they were in diapers. She brought over hot casseroles the week their father died. If she had turned, she went on. "Evelyn, we all saw it. We just didn't say it. The way they walked around your land like they already owned it. The way they talked to you at the market, like you were a burden. I told my husband last Christmas, something's off with those boys." I wish I'd said more. Her words warmed something in me. Not because I needed validation, but because silence had finally broken. And I wasn't the only one hearing the truth now. Later that evening, I did what I hadn't done in weeks. I opened my Facebook. Big mistake. Ben had posted a blurry black and white photo of the property with a long caption. "All we ever did was try to help. She's old, confused. We tried to manage things responsibly, but now we're being painted as criminals. Shame on anyone who believes we meant harm. The comments section was split down the middle. A few voices, mostly old friends of theirs, chimed in with "praying for you" and "family drama is so hard." But most of the replies were from people I hadn't heard from in years. "You stole from the woman who raised you. She taught my son in 3rd grade, best teacher he ever had. If she pressed charges, she had a damn good reason." And my favorite: "You don't get to cry manipulation when the only thing you ever managed was greed." I logged off. Let them fight shadows. I had no more to give them. Not excuses, not explanations, not a single inch more of myself. The house? Still mine. My peace? Firmly intact. But there was one thing still coming. Claire had filed a restraining order as a precaution, but she also contacted the County Fraud Division. They'd picked up the case. Because of the forged notary and the falsified digital signature, this wasn't just civil anymore. It was criminal. And Daniel and Ben, they had no idea what else was coming. It arrived on a Tuesday morning, thin envelope, plain cream color, no return address, just my name typed neatly in the center. Evelyn M. Rhodes. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I laid it on the table beside my tea, just stared at it while the kettle cooled. I already knew what it was. Claire had warned me to expect it. But still, something about the weight of official paper in your hand. It feels like a gavel before it's even struck. Eventually, I slit the envelope open with the same letter opener my father used for 30 years. Inside were 2 pages. The first bore the county seal in gold ink. The second had a simple heading: Notice of Criminal Proceedings. The state of Oregon was formally charging Daniel Rhodes and Benjamin Rhodes with filing fraudulent property deeds, financial exploitation of a senior citizen, attempted mortgage fraud, falsifying legal signatures. The words were sterile, cold, but they lit something hot in my chest. The trial was scheduled for 6 weeks from the date on the letter. I was not required to attend in person. My deposition had already been taken. But I could be present if I wished. I sat there for a long time, just holding that letter. Not crying, not celebrating, just thinking. About the little boys who used to fight over who got the last cinnamon roll. About Daniel's graduation, when I stood in the audience waving like a fool while he walked across the stage in borrowed shoes. About Ben, crying into my lap after his first breakup, asking me if anyone would ever really love him. And now, this. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired. Later that day, Claire called. "I figured you got the letter." "I did," I said softly. "They're going to be scared," she continued. "Especially when they realize it's not just me after them anymore. It's the county, possibly the state." "I don't want to see them locked up," I admitted. I just wanted them to know I wasn't nothing. Claire was quiet for a beat. Then she said, "They knew, Evelyn. That's why they tried to take everything from you before you realized it yourself." That stayed with me. I walked out onto the porch that evening, letter still in hand, and watched the wind move through the trees like they were whispering back and forth. I hadn't been down the driveway in days, hadn't ventured into town. I didn't need to. People came to me now, some with casseroles, some with hugs, most with silence. Kind, knowing silence. The kind that says, "We see you now." But the letter, that was different. It wasn't comfort. It wasn't pity. It was power. For the first time in a long time, the law was behind me, not just a system too big to fight. I wasn't just some old woman with a good memory and a crooked back. I was a homeowner, a caregiver, a legal witness. And finally, I was being heard. I folded the letter carefully, tucked it inside the Bible I kept in the drawer near my bedside. Not because I needed divine judgment, but because I needed a reminder of the truth I'd once underlined in red. A wise woman builds her house, but with her own hands, the foolish one tears hers down. They tore it down the second they thought I'd never push back. And now, piece by piece, brick by brick, I was building something they couldn't touch. I used to walk through this house like I owed it something. Every photo frame dusted, every creaking floorboard forgiven, every chipped teacup kept, because Daniel liked it when he was little. Or Ben used to drink cocoa from this one. I'd built a shrine out of sacrifice. And for what? So they could strip it from me like a coat they'd outgrown? Not anymore. The first thing I did was take down the pictures. Not all of them, just the ones that made me flinch. The ones where their smiles looked more like strategy than love. I boxed them carefully, wrapped each one in newspaper. Not out of sentimentality, out of closure. I wasn't burning bridges. I was clearing the clutter from the ones they'd already burned. Then I called Reuben, an old friend of my husband's, who ran a handyman business out of his garage. I told him I wanted changes, real ones. Changes like paint and curtains? He asked. Changes like identity, I replied. The next morning, we started with the front door. I had it painted deep forest green, bold, elegant, mine. Then we moved to the kitchen. For years, I'd let Ben and Daniel talk me out of updates. You don't need new countertops, Aunt Evie. Why spend money on a house that's basically retirement inventory? I let those words dictate too much. So I bought new countertops, quartz, pale, marbled, and beautiful. Each change felt like an apology to myself I didn't know I needed. I replaced the old guest bed, the one I'd let Ben sleep in when he came home too drunk to drive, with a reading nook, full of sunlight and silence. I donated their leftover clothes to a shelter. I scrubbed every surface they touched with lavender and vinegar and quiet fury. And in that fresh space, I could breathe again. Sharon came by one afternoon while Reuben was replacing the porch lights. Making the place over? She asked, eyes twinkling. Making it mine, I said, handing her a cold glass of tea. She sat with me on the new porch swing I'd ordered, the one Daniel had always called old-fashioned. Funny, how good it felt to bring the old things back once the wrong people were gone. What happens next? Sharon asked gently. With them, I mean. I shrugged. The court date's in 3 weeks. They'll probably plead. Claire says it's open and shut. And after that? After that, I forget they ever had a key to my peace. She reached over and squeezed my hand. Good. But peace doesn't come without shadows. That night, just past sunset, I saw a car slow roll down my street, headlights off, windows down. I recognized the shape of the driver, Daniel. He didn't stop, just passed slowly, watching. Maybe he thought I'd come running out. Maybe he was hoping to see sadness in the windows. Maybe he wanted to be sure I hadn't replaced him with someone else already. I didn't react, just turned off the porch light and locked the door. I wasn't afraid. Because this time, everything inside those walls, the title, the deed, the life, belonged to me. No more guilt, no more negotiations, no more folding myself into corners just to make them comfortable. I lived here now, not as a placeholder, not as a stepping stone, but as a woman who rebuilt her home from the bones of betrayal. It was quiet the morning he came. The air smelled like rain, but the sky hadn't opened yet. I was trimming back the honeysuckle near the fence line when I saw a familiar figure walking up the gravel drive. Slow, careful, like every step was a question. Ben. No car. No dramatic entrance. Just him. In worn jeans and a grey hoodie, head bowed like he was 12 again and had broken my best china. He stopped just short of the porch, eyes on the ground. I didn't move. "Can I talk to you?" he asked, barely above a whisper. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just wiped my hands on a rag and waited. He took it as permission. "I'm not here to make excuses," he said quickly. "I know what we did. I know what I did." He looked up for the first time. The boy I raised was still in there. Somewhere. But now he was buried beneath shame and something that looked like exhaustion. "I thought I was being smart," he continued. "Thought if we handled the paperwork, we could take care of everything before it became a mess. That's what Daniel said, that it'd be better if we just got ahead of things." My voice was flat. "Ahead of what?" He swallowed. "Your death." The wind shifted. A single leaf skittered across the porch floor. "I mean, you were getting older," he said, stumbling. "The place needed upkeep. We thought we were doing you a favor." "No," I said. "You thought you were doing yourselves a favor." He nodded, shame blooming hot across his face. "You're right." For a moment, we both stood in silence, the kind that used to live in our kitchen during long winters, before the lies, before the lawyer, before the arrest record that would follow him forever. "I still remember when you stayed up with me after my appendix surgery," he said, voice cracking. "You held my hand all night, told me I was safe." I looked at him then, really looked. This wasn't manipulation anymore. It was the kind of sorrow that comes when the consequences finally settle deep enough to echo. "I was safe, because you made me feel like I mattered," he said. "And I made you feel disposable." Tears welled in his eyes, but he didn't let them fall. "I don't want anything from you. Not a dime. Not forgiveness. I just needed to say, I remember who you were to me, and I'm sorry for who I became." I didn't cry, but something in me shifted, like a tight seam finally relaxing. I walked over slowly, stood just a foot from him, and said, "You were my second chance at family, and I gave it everything I had." He nodded. "I know." "I'm not angry anymore, Ben," I added. "But that doesn't mean the door opens again." He blinked. "I wouldn't ask it to." I reached into my apron pocket and pulled out something small, an old photo of us, taken when he was 8, me in a floppy sun hat, him with a wild grin and dirt on his face. I pressed it into his hand. "Take this. Remember who we were, but let me move on." He nodded, unable to speak, and then, without another word, he turned and walked away. No begging, no promises, just footsteps in gravel and a heart finally heavy enough to carry. I watched him until he was gone. Then I walked back inside, shut the door softly, and whispered the only truth that mattered now. The court date came and went. Claire attended on my behalf. She called afterward, voice calm but firm. They took the plea deal. Fraud, exploitation, 5 years probation, restitution payments, community service. No jail time, but a permanent mark on record. I didn't ask for more. The law had spoken, and more importantly, so had I. I sat alone in my garden that afternoon, hands buried in soil that smelled like spring and second chances. Around me, life was blooming. Thick-stemmed lilies, sweet alyssum, lavender rose humming with bees. I didn't plant to impress anyone. I planted because I could, because the earth still honored work, even when people didn't. Every day now, I rise with purpose. I tend to my home not as a caretaker for others, but as a woman reclaiming her space. I make tea exactly how I like it. 2 spoons of honey, no explanation. I leave the porch light on some nights, just to watch the moths dance. Sometimes I sit in the front room and hum to myself, a soft tune my mother used to sing while quilting. There is no one to impress here, only peace. Daniel never called. I heard through Sharon he moved out of state. Trying to outrun shame, she said, but it always knows your address. Ben sent one final letter. No begging, no excuses, just a single sentence. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I ruined it. I folded the letter and placed it in the same drawer that holds Claire's final invoice and the copy of the restitution agreement. I didn't respond. Some things deserve silence. It's been almost a year now. The land is still mine. I have friends who stop by. A young mother down the road brings her daughter over to help with the tomatoes. We plant, we laugh, we share silence without history. One morning, not long ago, I stood at the edge of the property with a spade in my hand and a single seedling cradled in the other. A rose bush, deep crimson, resilient. I planted it near the porch, beneath the window, where Daniel once asked me to hang blackout curtains so he could sleep in later. Now that same window lets the morning sun flood the room. I watered the new rose, patted the soil, and whispered, "Grow strong. Don't let anyone stunt your roots." Inside, on the hallway wall, there's a framed page from Claire's final court filing. Not to boast, just to remind myself. I did not imagine this. I was not too emotional, too soft, too gullible. Next to it, a smaller frame. Charles's handwriting from decades ago, faded but still legible. Never sign away your name. It's the last thing you own, and the first thing they'll try to take. I walk past it every morning now, barefoot, coffee in hand, windows wide open, and sometimes I smile and say aloud, "They said, just sign it. We'll explain later." I did. And then I made sure they had to explain everything to the police. And the garden grows, and I do too.